Temperatures and sea levels are rising all over the world. Low-lying coastal cities are already dealing with disastrous floods and are desperately trying to find innovative ways to combat rising sea levels. While some cities are sinking because of the rising sea levels, others are sinking due to the excessive groundwater pumping that generates pressure and volume change, causing the surface of a city to sink. Without drastic action, it could happen at any time and anywhere, even in your city. Welcome to Earthbound, where we explore topics on cities, countries, and Earth in general. Before we begin, help us out by clicking that like button. It only takes a second and we'd really appreciate it. Now, here are 10 sinking cities that will soon be underwater. Number 10, Miami, USA. While the whole United States East Coast is in grave danger, Miami is in particular extremely vulnerable to rising sea levels. Miami sea levels are rising faster than in many parts of the world due to ocean currents and the city's low ground location, causing flooding, contaminated drinking water, and significant damages to buildings and roadways. The rising tide has become an inevitable element of life in Miami, increasing at a rate of approximately 1 inch every 3 years. Scientists are even predicting that the sea level will rise at a faster rate in the next 15 years, adding another 6 inches, definitely not so good for Miami. Floodwaters in Miami rise from storm drains, making it impossible to maneuver without coming into contact with the water, which is combined with sewage and whatever else it picks up along the way. Of course, this means the vast portions of the city will eventually become permanently uninhabitable pretty soon. The rest of the United States should pay close attention to how Miami deals with its sea level epidemic unless it wants to lose a major part of its economy. Number 9, Alexandria, Egypt. The great city of Alexandria is built on low-lying land, which you will find is a common feature for most of the cities on this list. Since we've already established that sea levels are expected to increase by as much as 2 feet by 2050, this puts major areas of the Egyptian city at risk for flooding because of upstream dams that impede silt replenishment and natural gas extraction. The land on which Alexandria is built on, as well as the neighboring Nile Delta, is actually sinking at a similar rate as the sea is rising. Alexandria, Egypt's second city, is surrounded on 3 sides by the Mediterranean Sea and backs up to a lake, making it even more vulnerable to rising sea levels. Residents housed in low-lying districts have already begun to feel the effects, some even claiming that the fortifications installed by the local government really haven't had much of a difference. Until 1993, according to Egypt's Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, the sea level rose by an average of 1.8 millimeters each year. Over the next 2 decades, that number increased to 2.1 millimeters per year, and since 2012, it has sharply risen to 3.2 millimeters per year. We wouldn't want another Egyptian city underwater, so let's all make sure to do our part to avoid this scenario. Number 8, Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. According to a report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, sections of Vietnam's largest metropolis might be submerged by 2050. The city has been sinking at a rate of up to 80 millimeters every year due to the rapid population increase the city has seen in the last 20 years. Climate change and rising sea levels only further exacerbate the situation. Extreme weather is also becoming increasingly common in the city of roughly 9 million citizens, but the infrastructure to control flooding has not kept up. The water delivery system is one such infrastructure that has failed to keep up with the city's rapid growth. As a result, many residents and businesses have turned to extract groundwater extraction while waiting for clean piped water. Unfortunately, excessive groundwater extraction can result in subsurface cavities collapsing, causing the soil on top to sink, further submerging the entire city. Luckily, discussions around the situation are currently underway, with the city's government even proposing to build a massive dike in response. Number 7, New Orleans, USA. Another American city, the sinking soils of New Orleans are caused by both human and environmental forces. Depending on how the measurement is done, approximately only half of the greater New Orleans is above sea level. It used to be completely above sea level until engineers in the 1900s built a drainage system with hopes of correcting the rising sea levels. Instead, they mistakenly ended up sinking half of the city to below sea level. You see, before people arrive in the area, the Mississippi River regularly regularly deposited silt along the area's shoreline. As part of the drainage system, levees were built to prevent the natural buildup from occurring, which ended up starving the land of these natural sediments, removing water from the soil and creating air pockets, ultimately causing the entire area to be unstable. This caused the rapid sinking of the wetlands of New Orleans, and by the 1930s, only a few decades after the system was built, the entire third of the city had sunk below sea level. Number 6. Bangkok, Thailand. Flooding is a frequent and ongoing occurrence for more than 10 million people who live in Thailand capital city, Bangkok. With an average elevation of only 1.5 meters above sea level, the city dwells in extreme low-lying terrain and is positioned at the southern end of the Chao Phraya River basin, which creates frequent flooding problems as a result of urbanization and climate change. Because of its canals, the city was once known as the Venice of the East, but many of them have sadly been paved over due to increasing urbanization. Now, the rainwater that has been diverted has nowhere to go. Because of the buildup weight from increased urbanization and unregulated groundwater extraction, the country's capital is sinking twice as quickly as it was a decade ago, sinking 1 to 2 centimeters each year. Shockingly, scientists predict that the city will be entirely submerged in water within 20 years. We're now halfway through our video. If you're still with us, comment "sinking cities" down below. On to number 5, Dhaka, Bangladesh. The pressures on Dhaka are increasing as climate changes escalate. People used to be able to relocate to avoid the worst of seasonal flooding, but the increasing recurrence of waterlogging, which is simply the saturation of soil with water, is making farming quite unfeasible. Crop varieties are unable to withstand salt water, shutting down farms and making employment limited. According to the New York Times, Bangladesh only produces approximately 0.3% of the greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change and is, unfortunately, experiencing some of the worst effects of the rising sea levels. Despite contributing little to the industrial pollution that causes climate change, Bangladesh will bear the brunt of the results. Not only are the seas rising, but the country's land is sinking in tandem. Due to the extremely polluted rivers, locals often rely on pumping groundwater for drinking, causing the land to deflate. The problem is further exacerbated by poorly constructed seawalls and overall lacking infrastructure. Bangladeshis have already begun to migrate away from the lowest-lying settlement in the Bay of Bengal's river deltas, according to Bangladeshi scientists. At the current trajectory, by 2050, it is estimated that roughly 18 million people will be displaced due to the rising sea levels. Number 4, Houston, USA. Houston, we have a problem. Due to the heavy groundwater pumping, parts of the city of Houston are sinking at a rate of 2 inches per year. The city depends heavily on aquifers, which are porous rock bodies that serve as natural filters to provide water to households, businesses, and farms. Overpumping can cause these aquifers to become depleted, causing the land to compress and sink. The overall Houston-Galveston region is one of the largest areas of subsidence in the United States. The city had experienced nearly 10 feet of subsidence that covered an area of nearly 32,000 square miles by 1979. In recent years, infrastructure destruction, flooding, and the loss of wetland ecosystems have all increased, leading to a visible altering of low-lying coastal regions. As Houston sinks, the more vulnerable it becomes to increasingly regular disasters like Hurricane Harvey, which destroyed nearly 135,000 homes and forced 30,000 people to flee their homes. Number 3, Lagos, Nigeria. The city of Lagos, which is found in Nigeria, is built partly on the mainland and partly on surrounding islands. It is the most populous city on the African continent and is facing considerable climate challenges, which have been amplified due to a weak drainage system and, you guessed it, excessive groundwater extraction. Because of these factors, Lagos's southern continental shelf is sinking, drawing the Gulf of Guinea closer, while the Sahara Desert to the north expands due to drought and hot temperatures, since Nigeria's coastline is so low. Even a mere 3 to 9 feet increase in sea level would have a devastating impact on human activities in the region, according to a study. Aside from rising sea levels, the city is also due to be plagued by an increase in rainfall over the next few years because of climate change, caught between a dry and a wet place. Number 2, Venice, Italy. If you're familiar with Venice, you probably already know of the acqua alta, or high water, which occurs many times a year when the tides are high. Because of that, Venice is sinking at a rate of 0.8 inches per year. That city has been said to have been sinking for several years now, but a recent study indicates it could be totally submerged sooner than expected. According to a new climate change report, Venice will be underwater by 2100 if global warming continues unabated. Plate tectonics is the primary cause of Venice's sinking. The historical city lies on top of the Adriatic Plate, which is being subducted by the Apennines Mountains, which basically means the mountains are eating the region up. In 2003, Italy began construction on a flood barrier of 78 gates spanning its 3 inlets. It was named Mose. The barrier was meant to be finished in 2011 but was later to be finished sometime this year. The underwater barriers have been built to minimize the amount of water entering the lagoon in order to protect them and avoid further erosion. The system will be fully operational by the autumn of 2021, following a trial period which began in October 2020. You're nearly at the end of our video. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed. That way you'll always be notified of our future videos. Number 1. Jakarta, Indonesia. Soon to overtake Tokyo as the world's most populated metropolis, this rapidly growing city is expected to be totally submerged by 2050. Prone to flooding, Jakarta is sinking at a rate of up to 10 centimeters per year, making it the world's fastest sinking city. The ground has fallen 2.5 meters in 10 years in portions of North Jakarta, which are particularly vulnerable to flooding. Because of the rising sea levels and the restriction of water access, the city's limited water supply, the majority of its population must rely on groundwater extraction for drinking and commercial purposes. When the Dutch arrived in Indonesia in the 1600s and created what is now Jakarta, they divided the city to keep the populace separated. Eventually, this segregation resulted in an unequal water piping infrastructure, excluding the majority of indigenous Jakartans and requiring them to seek alternative sources of power. Even if land sinking could be stopped, Jakarta would still be on the edge of the sea, and sea levels are rising quickly. To combat the threat, the city has already built a network of canals and seawalls, but climate change continues to make the dire situation even worse. Hey, thanks for watching. Want to suggest a video or have something to say? Let us know in the comments section below.